Fellow musicians, composers, musicologists, observers, I welcome you to my presentation on listening to films, music, sound and the diegetic spectrum. Firstly, a couple of points worth noting. When I use the term film sound, I'm referring to the entirety of the audible elements that accompany a film's visuals, so dialogue, music, sound effects, barking dogs, the lot. Also, I'm approaching this from the perspective of a practitioner, someone on the ground level working with these concepts in action and not as an academic. My name is Spesh Maloney. I live in the UK. I'm a screen/film composer of works, music and sonic works, as well as an audio post-production professional, working in TV, ads and trailers and the like. To begin with, I'd like to show you a fairly typical example of the kind of work I do. It's an advert campaign for an exhibition at the British Museum.
Sweet swan of Avon. What a sight it were to see thee in our waters yet appear. Soul of the age, the applause, delight, the wonder of our stage. My Shakespeare, rise. Thou art a monument without a tomb, and art alive still while thy book doth live. Triumph, my Britain, thou hast one to show to whom all scenes of Europe homage owe. He was not of an age, but for all time.
What's notable about my approach to this job is that the editor had sent this film, as often is the case, with no audio attached to it. It was quite literally a silent movie, and all the sound that you hear was either added or created in post-production. And this is what all of those audio elements look like on a timeline on the software that I use called Logic Pro. Like many composers, I've embraced quite a broad approach to this creative sonic vocation. My remit spans from what would be considered as typical orchestral cinematic music, think strings and Western art music, to electroacoustic soundscapes and experimental bangs and whizzes, as well as the more technical exercises in tidying up recorded sounds such as dialogue editing and level mixing. And occasionally I'm fortunate enough to receive a commission to try something a little bit more avant-garde. I think of this as a natural evolution to the sonic world. As composers, sound manipulation is essentially what we specialise in, and our necessity to master the technology with which many of us use to compose, our digital audio workstations, has evolved a new generation of music composer, come sound technician, come sonic experimenter. In a general sense, these are the three elements into which film sound can be deconstructed. Firstly, dialogue, or more precisely, direct sound, is mostly recorded on location, which includes talking, the rustling of clothes, footsteps, and doors closing, things like that. Next, sound effects, which can be both literal or abstract, or a combination of both. One famous sound effect, famous to those of us who live in the sound effects world, is the blaster sound in Star Wars. A sound which is synchronous with a weapon firing, so we accept it correlates with the visual source, but we're actually hearing the hammering of a long taut piece of steel cable. And thirdly, music. And this is the London Symphony Orchestra, famed for recording countless movie soundtracks. But there's both the music we hear in an underscore and also the music, for example, playing on the radio in the background, or if there's a scene at an opera, there's music playing on the set. And one concept often discussed in film sound is that of diegesis. And for anyone not familiar with this term, as we try and welcome a broad church in this discussion, I shall divulge. Diegetic sound are sounds that are physical reality within the film world. So visible sounds that exist within the environment of the picture, or that could plausibly exist in it. Things like dialogue, a car driving down the street, or footsteps. But they also can include bird song, leaves rustling in the trees, that dog barking in the distance, which now I've said you will hear 10 times more often. And also non-diegetic sound, which is sounds that does not exist within the physical world of the story. One example being the London Symphony Orchestra. The LSO were not present in Tatooine to underscore Luke Skywalker as he stares pensively towards two setting suns. Although we accept this as a combination, as a viable suspension of disbelief. That's the wonderful thing about film sound. We are able to transcend from a reality that is presented before us through a spatial and temporal shift to hear and accept an audible abstraction that has no place being there. How does this work in practice? Let me play you an ad I did for the Greater Manchester Transport Authority. Driving too fast can kill. Limits save lives. We can attribute which sounds are diegetic and which are not. We can also deconstruct our sound elements to whether they are direct sound, effect sounds, or music sounds. By multiplying diegesis with our 3 sonic elements, we actually have 6 categories. Diegetic sound and direct sound. Direct diegetic sound, so that's the engine noise and the footsteps. And we can also have non-diegetic direct sound, which is the voiceover here at the end, which is, you know, it's not part of the sonic world within the car. It's not a sound effect, and it's not music. Diegetic sounds, which are sound effects, the rain atmos track, the indicator clicking, and the sirens going off. And the non-diegetic sound effects, we have a high-pitched flatline sound as we focus on the woman's face, and the reversing sounds of the car moving backwards. And music-wise, we have diegetic music, which is the music playing within the car radio, and the non-diegetic music, which is the underscore. There's a bit of kind of piano music there. It's all fairly straightforward, but if we dig a little bit deeper, there's a few grey areas that we can question. The music playing from the male driver's car, we hear it twice as a diegetic music source from inside the car, but the third time we hear it, the camera is placed outside of the vehicle. We still accept this as a diegetic source, but it's also now out of its original context and working as a kind of partially diegetic underscore. Next, same goes for the indicator on the car, because indicators don't actually make any noise. They're lights. The ticking is a sound that can be heard from within the car to notify the driver that it's blinking. And not something you'd hear from the exterior of the vehicle, kind of clear as day. So this is an abstraction from the film's diegetic reality, a dramatic embellishment. And the flatline sound, as we look at the woman's face, there's a kind of meta-film language to using this flatline sound, which translates as "this person is deceased." But what's underneath is also interesting. The atmos and background sounds are distorted and manipulated in such a way to create a kind of post-crash shell shock-like effect. And the reversing sounds of the cars. The advert is split into footage that's played forwards and backwards. The sounds used in the backwards section seem like the plausible reversal sounds of the action. But of course, what does a backward diegetic sound like? And there's actually a whole host of reversing sounds which were taken from reversing tape and reversing various other things, and aren't car sounds at all. So let's watch this back, but being mindful of all of these attributes.
Driving too fast can kill. Limits save lives.
I'm going to be as bold as to say that I don't think this theoretical model of diegesis quite fits our working use of it. I think it's too binary. Instead of two mutually exclusive concepts, I think there's actually only one category. To what degree of being diegetic or non-diegetic are these sounds? Not one or the other. Diegeticness, if you like. That can exist on a spectrum. One end of the spectrum, we have the most diegetic sounds, and what could that be? Perhaps dialogue, There's nothing particularly abstract or non-diegetic about a synchronous visual subject moving their mouth and us, the viewer, hearing the words that are coming out of it. Or is there? Let's take our actor. The person is talking, but there's this guy, the sound recordist, using a microphone to record them. Different microphones have and different recording hardware will colour the audio capture in different ways. And there's microphone positioning. Closely micing the subject has a disproportionate presence and depth of voice relative to the distance of the camera. And there's also the audio post-production side of it. So there's compression, EQ, reverb, saturation, all things like that, which have a host of outside influences to the audio that are not present within the film world, and just add a degree of abstraction to the sound source. And okay, it's not a big jump away from the original direct sound, but it's not entirely uncoloured either. So this can be one end of the spectrum, let's say about here. And what about the least diegetic sounds? Or let's use our trusty London Symphony Orchestra underscore, who weren't present to underscore Luke Skywalker staring pensively in the two suns on the planet of Tatooine. Now, in my research here, I was going to borrow a concept from psychology called transference, a kind of emotional projection that I'm interested in bringing into this debate, but that will have to be for another day as I'm not a psychologist and I don't want to misuse it. So in the meantime, let's move the LSA further towards the less diegetic end. But it's when we look at instances where there's a clear merging of diegesis that our spectrum comes into its own. The next clip, by pure coincidence, is another car crash ad I was working on, using a lot of sound design to depict the aftermath from inside the vehicle. So first of all, we'll watch the full version. Okay, now let's review the film without any sound at all. Totally different, but we'd expect it to be. So how about with only direct sound? So we'll put some localized Atmos down and the scream at the end. Okay, still in the diegetic world, but moving more into a diegetic hybrid, let's add a more enhanced Atmos track with exaggerated low-end bass sounds and a richer general interior car tone. Now, a useful sound trick to augment tension is to add a heartbeat. We could suggest this is the heartbeat of the man in the car that we're hearing, but just more pronounced. And heading more into the realms of less diegetic, we can now heighten the scream at the end with a crescendo of noise. And another note trick to create a sense of unease is this tinnitus sound. So we'll add this in, accepting a temporal shift into the headspace of the man in the car. And the final version we used of this scene was actually put through an enveloping filter to reduce the bandwidth of frequencies that are present. Again, to signify a transposition into the man's head in the post-crash shell shock-like state, but still containing diegetic sounds of the environment, but while into the non-diegetic situation. As for our spectrum, well, I'd like to place the following sounds as such. So, the atmos and the rain and the traffic, that's down that end, and then the reversing crescendo we heard with the scream, that's more towards the other end, as it synchronises with the scream and is part of that overall effect. But the interesting bit is how we consider things like the enhanced heartbeat or the exaggerated atmos sounds. As viewers, we possess an ear critical enough to delineate an array of sonic layers, but we can also choose to ignore that delineation. The layers themselves can be at opposing ends of the spectrum, but we can hear them also as a singular event and experience the moment dynamically across the spectrum. And perhaps it's possible to experience several points of the spectrum simultaneously. One question I've asked myself in this research is what the relevance is to us composers and sound designers to theorising in this way, and what makes it an interesting discussion for screen composers and those in audio post-production is that it's become an amalgamation of what were different disciplines in film production, and as a result the final product is evolving. And to show that, I'd like to finish by playing a short documentary film entitled The Link, set in a place called Malvern Link, part of Great Malvern in Worcestershire. It's a film about a group of singers discussing their intimate feelings and responses to coming out of lockdown and being able to meet up together to play music, to sing, to improvise for the first time since people's social interactive world basically ground to a halt. It's possibly the most English thing to be made since the advent of cricket, but it's also a candidly captured moment in time. For this film, it was a deliberate decision to use as much sound and music from the location recording, direct sound, more diegetic sound. And using that, we were able to create a kind of a Malvern bubble in the film. A reflection of the bubble-like experiences of living through a lockdown. So outside sonic sources are kept to a minimum, which maintains this sense of locality and kind of narrative introspection, using a high degree of diegeticness. Yet we're able to manipulate emotions using a stylistically non-diegetic underscore, but with a greater diegetic presence, or certainly being more towards that end of the spectrum than, say, using the London Symphony Orchestra, who we couldn't afford anyway. Armed with your new understanding of this diegetic spectrum, there's a few moments I'd like you to contemplate and mentally place on that line. Dialogue. In the introduction, we hear voiceovers of people in the film. We see establishing shots, but no synchronous footage that places the dialogue within the setting. But, however, it was recorded on location as direct sound, so it should be more towards the more diegetic side of the spectrum. But it's also voiceover. Later, as the individuals are introduced, then we travel all the way back down the spectrum to being more diegetic, as we can see the synchronous action with the audio. As for the music, well, most of the music was recorded during the shoot. It was performed in the most part by the individuals there. And in the film, the music starts life as an underscore. so that would be surely less diegetic. But it weaves and flip-flops in and out of being synchronous, and we could say it has a dynamic state of diegesis. And there's also an additional post-production score that underscores the diegetic score too. But the film score, be it diegetic or not, was curated and edited from several unrelated moments during the shoot, many of which were not used in the cut, but in fact purposely recorded to capture the music score. So a kind of temporal shift, but still within the Malvern bubble. And the whole process ends up being quite meta. It's a film about a group of people getting together to perform music and record that music to underscore this film about people performing music in order to underscore a film. Let's just take a look. Oh, and about 25 seconds in, there's a tracking shot of across some stained glass window, and you can hear the fluttering of some birds. However, there are no birds in the church. This is a sound effect. Could the birds plausibly be within the world of the film, or is it purely superficial, less diegetic sound?
I think at the time I didn't really think about it. It's not really till a bit more recently that I realised how much it has affected me.
It's been challenging, I think. I'm a very, very sociable person. I really appreciate the energy of other people around.
I just feel a deep sense of loss and pain. And the only way to get through it is to actually find ways to get through this.
Before a year and a half ago, I spent no time by myself, ever.
It was quite hard for me because I couldn't express my musical way, like the way I would do music normally. So I didn't really connect with music through a lot of the pandemic.
You know, Malvern's a small place with an even smaller kind of creative community. So I think we found each other quite organically. I met Sarah when I was like 4, so she's just a lot quieter than I am.
I hadn't met Freddie in years. We knew each other as, children. Me and Tim went to school together, so we've done various things together, all the way through our childhood, really.
I've known Sarah through church as well. Freddie, I've heard his name a lot of times, so it's nice to actually meet him face to face. And then it was Lara. We had a nice sit on the hills one day and admired the view, and we spoke about music and our hobbies.
Yeah, and then I met Tim, just to meet up and have a chat about one aspect of the project. And it's a small place, so you kind of bump into people.
So the youngsters I knew, but a lot of them, like Tim and Sarah, they were new faces.
I'd met Lara briefly before the pandemic, but not really. So I met all these people really during the pandemic.
I actually met Liz maybe 5 years ago. That connection came back together, and my friend Ava was like, do you want to come and do this? And I was like, yeah, okay, why not?
She holds us all together. She's the centre of the group in some ways, and she's let us be ourselves and form the group how we want it, but she was the one that brought us all together.
Yeah, she was just lovely and asked me to sing one of her pieces in a concert that then never happened.
Well, I knew Lara was a singer that we'd encountered, and she lives just near to us. It was kind of last autumn, so we was already in lockdown when this all started to emerge. And I was actually quite concerned about all those people who were maybe just graduated from uni, and a lot of people have come back to live back with their parents. I was thinking, if that had been me, I would have been going pretty nuts. So we worked on Zoom for the first half of this year. And we were meeting kind of once every 2 weeks.
We thought about these days what the 18 to 30-year-olds are doing of their lives. And we thought it might be a nice idea to create a new project where we'd invite youngsters in to experiment. And we decided to call this project Sing a New Song, so that it had a new focus.
We all have a lot of mutual things, be they structural, where we're from, what we're interested in. But in terms of individual personalities and the ages and the backgrounds we're coming from, individually very different.
I like the group side of music. That's where I feel more comfortable. I don't practice really. I don't really play music by myself. How I connect with music is through groups. I sing in big choirs and little choirs, or like the marching band, we play as a big group, and I think that's what it is for me. I'm not the most musical person in the world, but it's the connecting with others through music is good for me.
When you play with other people, you're resonating with them. We all have our own heartbeat. It's all beating, but when we play together, the heartbeats are kind of aligning, and you have these amazing chemistry that you have. If you're happy, you can let that out. If you're angry, if you're anxious, if you're sad, any emotion that you have, you can let that out on the drums.
Yeah, you want to evolve that with other people where you can respond to each other and develop ideas together and benefit from each other's different knowledge and skills and experience.
As we're listening to each other and connecting, you use other people's energy. It's a wonderful experience, and it brings you together in a wonderful way. I think it's a greatly fulfilling experience, improvisation. I think what's so lovely now is that this is the first time we've been able to get together and see each other face to face. There's nothing better than eye contact and the physical human being, because we see so much more than just on a Zoom camera.
Though Zoom is amazing, I think music through Zoom can feel quite, the spotlight's on you, where actually when you're in a room, everyone's together and you can just sort of go along with whatever's going on. It doesn't feel as intrusive.
You can't really do music on Zoom because of the time delay, because of the quality of the sound, because your own sound overwhelms it. And I remember one session we tried doing free-flowing music together and it just didn't really flow because you couldn't tell what it sounded like. You can't respond to other people, really.
What's lacking in Zoom? Like the kind of I'm doing it now, gestural kind of things that we don't know about that are going on, subconscious picking up of body language. There's a lot going on in the room when we're all together that can never ever happen on Zoom. It's not the same. It's just not the same.
The music making was very frustrating. I did try, I have to say I did try. And I have been doing a lot of Zoom music. I know how it can work really well. But for this particular group, they just didn't want to go there, really. They just didn't want to do it. So we did a lot of talking, sharing stuff, so that was what they needed. I suppose what I've tried to do with them is to just start to build a relationship of trust with me and with the rest of the group as well, so they know that nobody's going to give them a hard time if they're having a really bad day, because it's been such a really difficult time for everyone. They've all been going through some really, challenging things.
And then it kind of became slightly like therapy a bit. Various people in the group had really difficult points, all of us actually. And I think without really knowing it, we were meeting to speak and connect, just reassure ourselves that we weren't just suddenly these silos that the world can't accommodate anymore in the same way.
I'd just been retired at term when I heard that my husband had been diagnosed with esophageal cancer stage 4, and that's been a hugely traumatic journey these last months. We are in a society today where people have passed away in a hospital and haven't actually had their loved ones there. But I was there with my son and his Stephen's daughter and our prospective daughter-in-law, and we were all caring for Stephen, so we were very fortunate to have him alongside us right to the end. Initially, I felt brave, and although it was a shock to hear that I was going to be losing my lifelong partner and husband, all we wanted to do was make him as comfortable as possible, and so we were working just like a roller coaster, just through the night and having ways of just trying to keep him calm and comfortable. But then after that, and after the funeral, there's a sense that you take an absolute dive.
Being very honest with you, I have had a lot of real ups and downs mentally over this period. That time by yourself can be really difficult, and I've found myself, really struggling actually mentally. So
for me, I'm quite sort of introverted and need to just, if I'm going to actually do something, I need to just sit on my own quietly and do it. Yeah, and I think I am quite an emotional person and need to express that creatively. For me, not being able to do any singing and singing with people and to people, I ended up getting really demotivated.
I think the anxieties that surrounded it were not to do with the music. They were to do with all the anxieties that we've learnt to have in this last year and a half. I'm kind of almost a bit envious of like people who could sit and write and write their own music or even just perform completely by themselves. I definitely need the backup and the sharing bit.
Actually, through the pandemic, I've learnt to be more confident in my singing because I've had to sing with less people. And I've kind of been thrown into it a bit, sort of almost by mistake. I still sometimes come across a bit shy, but I'm starting to get comfortable with these people and know that it doesn't matter that I'm not at the same musical talent as them all. I think it really is like this special feeling when everyone is singing the same thing and it just rings. That is a feeling that I don't think I've experienced anywhere else.
It's just like one of those things that you always took for granted as something that you could do, and then suddenly we can do it again, and you just appreciate it so much more, and can start to kind of refine things, for me anyway, refinding things inside me and trying to kind of wake up a bit from the hibernation of the last year and a half.
I think it's going to make me really appreciate what we can do when we can do it. Being able to sing in these big choirs, it was a normal thing to me, but now I think I'm really going to appreciate it more, and because I might not be able to do it tomorrow.
Something interesting will come from it, and I hope some kind of closure for this chunk of the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic's going to go on forever, but tomorrow's the first day of restrictions being lifted or whatever. So maybe this is the end of this period.
I really feel very, very fortunate to be part of this because I didn't know anyone really before this group, which is really cool. And so that's been a wonderful opportunity to get to know everyone, and they're all such beautiful individuals in their own way. And I have a lot of energy, and that's a beautiful thing, and it's creative. Sometimes that energy can kind of turn to anxieties, it can turn to worries, it can turn to rational fears, and actually just be able to breathe and say it's okay, and you can accept how you feel. You don't have to be on top of the world every single day, as long as you find something to be grateful for every day. So I'm going to try my best to be grateful every day for something.
I've experienced the most extraordinary love from all of these people. They've reached out to me in the most wonderful, wonderful way. And I've almost felt that I was carried along by their support and their love. COVID's been a menace in many ways. It's damaged lots of people's mental health, and particularly young people. They haven't felt that they can really achieve what they want to do. So I think we have a big mission ahead of us in Sing a New Song, and I think we need to take the bull by the hand and really make the best of it and really do something fantastic.
Spesh, good afternoon, and a huge word of thanks from my side. Can you hear me? Spesh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Great, great. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for a wonderful, more than a presentation. It's a window into your creative world. It is absolutely fascinating. I'm sure that there are a number of questions. I don't, however, see any in the chat. So perhaps I should just fire away. I've known your work for quite a number of years. I've been aware of your work for quite a number of years, and we've interacted quite a bit. And I'd like to ask you whether you go into a different mode of expression, a different mode of sonic exploration, depending on the type of project that you work on, the type of challenge that you set. So, for example, if your work in theatre and Shakespeare particularly, does that differ? Your approach there differ from tackling another type of project?
I think there's a lot to be said about having worked in theatre and moving between film and theatre, because I think you do tend to have a more narrative-based approach, and perhaps you're used to working in different kinds of collaboration. In theatre, certainly, it's a lot more hands-on. It's a lot more. You spend a lot more time together with directors and producers, and it's a lot more kind of ground level collaborative. Whereas multimedia post-production is sending things across, internet and email correspondence, so it's not as dynamic a process. So I think I'm more used to having that experience in theatre, and being perhaps a little bit more used to chopping and changing things quite a lot in that approach in multimedia.
Right. I don't work in your field, although I'm obviously very much interested in composition. But I'd be interested to know what type of briefing do you get? Is there a standard briefing that you'd receive for working on a Shakespeare piece compared to something filmic or work in the advertising world? Have you found that there is a sort of a standard briefing that you receive, or is it pretty much interacting with directors and/or following your own creative gut feel, so to speak?
It's a very good question. Very important question. Yeah, there is no standard brief actually. It generally will differ with each project and director, because some people like to leave the audio side of things completely up to me and have a much more autonomy. I just did an installation that's going live in Manchester today, or this weekend, and it's projections into the water, and it's all kind of very set around about the visualization with the people I work with, and they like what I do, and they're just like, "Oh, make a score for it. Whatever you do, I'm sure will sound wonderful."
Right.
And I don't often get many notes back from them like, "Oh, it's perfect. We love it," because I think that they want to remove that creative process from themselves and truly collaborate and leave it to somebody else.
Right.
And
I think that's. Sorry.
Sometimes you'll get what we call a temp track, where somebody will send you something that's already embedded with the cut that they've sent you, and your job then is to kind of replicate what their vision is already. Sometimes a piece of music which is quite famous, they want to use it, but there's all kind of problems, legality.
I think where I'm heading off, it's a wonderful answer, thank you for that. Where I'm heading towards is that you as a composer, that's a very powerful role. It is sometimes looked down upon, sometimes ignored, sometimes taken for granted, but it's an extremely powerful element in all this type of multimedial work. I was hoping for a few more questions. However, maybe I'll just hog the airwaves for a while. The lowdown on the tools that you use, soft and hardware. What does your composition platform look like? Your DAW?
Fairly in the box actually. I've kind of slowly over time and gradually removed a lot of outboard gear, so it's a lot of it's just done within the computer. What I concentrate on is high quality input, so any investment kit wise I put into microphones, preamps and interfaces, and an acoustic treatment. So anything you record, you know you're starting with good quality. And then I like to manipulate the audio, within the software and the plugins that are available, which, to be honest, are kind of far-reaching and so powerful now with what you can do in terms of sonic manipulation.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it seems to me as if we do not have any further input. Spesh, wonderful work. Thank you so much. You've really made my Sunday morning a very, very special occasion. And I do sincerely hope that we can invite you back in person next time, please.
Yes, well, I was supposed to be there in 2 weeks' time, so I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
No, not this time. However, my office door is always open, so see you soon.
Okay, all right.
Ciao.
Yeah, bye.